There's no stopping them, it takes no skill.
I might die, I switched controller.
Yep, that was the worst idea.
On an advanced game like Fortnite, controller players had no business in competing.
Oh, what? Controller player!
FaZe, Sway, Nero, and Jarvis all played Fortnite on controller. At one point, controller players made up 85% of the game's player base, but today that number went down to under 10%. So how does everyone switch to keyboard and mouse and just leave controller altogether only to lose all the skill they've learnt on controller? This is the rise and fall of Fortnite controller players. Back in 2017, Fortnite released a trailer introducing Fortnite to consoles like the PS4 and the Xbox Series S. Players could then get the Fortnite game for free and play the early seasons. Back then, controller players couldn't build as there was no turbo building yet. And building on keyboard and mouse was way easier than building on controller, as controller players would have to scroll through each build and press so many buttons in order to do something that took one button press on a keyboard. Overall, building on controller puts you on a massive disadvantage until the Builder Pro settings was released in January of 2018. Builder Pro made building on controller as easy as mouse and keyboard. You press one button to switch to your builds, then another one to instantly place a build piece, and you use the same bind to switch back to your guns. This caused a massive increase in the skill level of controller players, and players like Jarvis and FaZe Sway started making themselves known while making videos using a controller. FaZe Sway started making controller setting videos, while Jarvis won early tournaments on controller. At this time, other players like Aiden, Billa, Nick Mercs, and Nicky30 himself all played Fortnite on controller anyways. Although Builder Pro was a massive improvement, keyboard and mouse was still the better input to play on, as it was easier to aim using your whole arm on a mouse, compared to controller where all you have is a tiny plastic stick to move around with your thumb. Luckily, controller players had aim assist to make up for this. And in September of 2018, Fortnite announced one of the most revolutionary things in gaming history: crossplay between PC and console. This is the very first time when console and PC players would be able to play in the same lobby. When this happened, console players realized that they could just play on PC by plugging in their controller. Instead of playing on a console where they are capped on 60 FPS, they could now connect their controller to a PC and play on much higher FPS. Also, the PCs provided the controller players with much less input delay. With the better performance, controller players were getting closer and closer to competing with mouse and keyboard players. On top of this, a few months after the crossplay update, something insane was discovered. A controller player named Upshaw was messing around with his settings one day and realized that his aim assist was much stronger when he had higher FPS. He turned his game all the way down to as little as 30 FPS and had little to no aim assist. But as he raised it higher and higher, his aim assist became stronger and stronger. So overall at the time, it was easier to edit on keyboard and mouse, but it was easier to aim on controller since they added aim assist, which was extremely overpowered, and building became almost equal on both platforms since Fortnite added Builder Pro to controller. The discovery where aim assist improved as you got better FPS would cause every controller player who took the game seriously and played competitive to switch to PC immediately. Shortly after this discovery was the beginning of L2 spamming. Whenever you aim down sights, the aim assist would just lock onto the player you're looking at. And so this means that constantly aiming in and out meant that you would have robot-like aim. One of the first players to master the L2 spam was Aiden. Aiden made himself known by playing one of his first tournaments called the Summer Skirmish, where he 1v1'd one of the best players at the time, whose name was Nick Mercs. Nick was known as the best controller player with the most earnings. Aiden absolutely dominated Nick Mercs, making him the new best controller player.
Game or two, it doesn't spell the end. Is this Nick versus Aiden? Is this Nick versus Aiden?
Shots oh my Nick God, goes down. Dude, Nick.
Aiden gets too much inside here. He's got to go for it soon. And here we go, 93.
He switched to the wrong gun.
Aiden catches him off guard.
Nick switched to the wrong gun.
Are you kidding?
If you look at the leaderboard from this tournament, everybody played on a keyboard and mouse except for 5 controller players. But this was a turning point because controller players realized that they could compete. Starting on 2019, Fortnite started hosting tons of open tournaments which anybody could play, which included Fortnite's $30 million Fortnite World Cup. Although every mouse and keyboard player was complaining about how overpowered aim assist was, controller players did not perform well at all. In fact, out of the 100 players who qualified for the World Cup, only 7 players played on controller. That leaves 93 other players who played on keyboard and mouse. Considering around 75% of all Fortnite players at the time used a controller, you would think that more than 7 of them would be able to qualify. The best controller player placement in solos was a 30-second by Lech. This shows how dominated keyboard players are over controller players. Well, at the beginning of Chapter 2, new sensitivity settings got released. This made Fortnite on controller more customizable so everyone was able to build and aim better. One of the best players on controller after this update was Unknown Army.
I'm such a controller player! Yo, I just triple headshot him!
He's dead.
Oh my god!
Unknown completely mastered aiming on top of piece control, and it showed in his tournament placements. He won FNCS in Chapter 2 Season 1, and also managed to win 6 solo cash cups along with a couple duo cash cups. There was a huge shift on every tournament leaderboard this season as time and time again, there were more and more. So what happened that suddenly made controller players so good? Controller players were earning rather than mouse and keyboard, while players like Unknown were using the legacy aim assist setting, which made L2 spamming broken. Other controller players started the switch to linear. The thing is, everyone thought that legacy aim assist was the real issue because of how overpowered Unknown Army made it seem. And finally, this single-handedly caused Epic Games to remove it, and everybody finally thought that Epic Games nerfed controller into the ground, but little did they know, it just got even better. Nobody realized that the new linear settings just got even better. It was strong while aiming down sights, but the hit fire was basically aimbot. This meant that the new strategy of playing on controller was to just jump in someone's box, and 50-50 lost of players wouldn't even carry a shotgun, because carrying an AR and SMG was a better option to L2 spam. This caused tournaments to be dominated by controller players, especially in the solo FNCS Invitational where 75% of all players who qualified were using one. Once Chapter 2 Season 1 ended, Fortnite decided that something finally needed to change as they saw how people abused aim assists and how tournaments were being played, so they nerfed the strength of aim assists by 30%. This quickly showed a drop on controller player placements as most competitive controller players relied on their aim assist instead of actual skill and talents. On later seasons, the player count of controller players who played competitive tournaments decreased, and more people decided to switch to keyboard and mouse. This happened because of 2 main reasons. Firstly, aim assists had huge bugs and gotten much weaker, where you would randomly lose your aim assist during competitive matches. This might not seem like a huge deal, but aiming without aim assist is very difficult, and when you're in a lobby with the best of the best, you would need the aim assist to perform. Also, it was very difficult to use scoped weapons on controller rather than a mouse, as there was very little aim assist on scoped weapons for controller players, and they had less control, and to endly, it was easier to build and edit on keyboard and mouse rather than controller. Fortnite is a mechanical game with so many buttons, and a keyboard and mouse could press those buttons much quicker than a controller can, and using a mouse made it much easier to edit rather than on a controller joystick. Finally, these 2 reasons made competitive players to either quit the game or switch to a keyboard and mouse. Only Reed and Mero were able to adapt right now and play against keyboard and mouse players competitively. In fact, before Mero stopped playing competitive, recently he won a global championship at LAN, with Cooper making him the only player on controller to be able to win a LAN tournament. And Reed just got a 3rd place spot on Major 2 Grand Finals this year with Cooper and Curly, and so this is the end of an era for controller players on Fortnite. Like the video for this type of content, and I'll see you in the next one.